What's the best day of the week? It's Friday, right? And that means it's mailbag time. Always excited to get into the mailbag here on the Morning Pit. We got great questions today, a lot of them revolving around the transfer portal, as you might imagine, but somebody's even questioning the Amsal Delilich breakout game that is definitely coming at some point. So I will defend my Amsal Delilich hype that continues unabated. I will, unabated, whatever, unstopped. This is a train that is not going to slow down, the Amsal Delilich hype train. So, we will not be dissuaded by a game where he goes 0 for 1 in 18 minutes of play like he did on Wednesday afternoon. We're not going to be dissuaded by it. You think I'm going to get, turned away from the Amsal Delilich hype train because he went 0 for 1 in 18 minutes? Have you not been following along here for the past, however long it's been since he committed? No. We'll talk about Amsal Delilich. We'll talk about the transfer portal. We'll talk about what's going on in all of Pitt sports with your questions here on the Morning Pitt Mailbag, the Friday edition on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, it's a Friday edition of the Morning Pit, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You know what we do on Fridays? It's the mailbag. I feel like we haven't done one of these in a while, but I guess it was probably just last week we didn't do it. Last Thursday was the bowl game. The bowl game feels like it was like 2 months ago, but last Thursday was the bowl game, so the Friday edition of the Morning Pit wasn't a mailbag. It was just another bowl game recap. I almost called it a recrap, but I mean, like, that'd be a little bit too on the nose. Let's try and avoid the blue material here on the Morning Pit. But yeah, we didn't have a mailbag last week. I think we did one the week before, probably. Whatever date that was, December 20th or something like that. But we're flying into 2025, our first Morning Pit mailbag of the new year, our first one of January, and getting back on it after taking a week off. I don't know about you guys. I feel like we're settling into the groove again. Thursday, the kids went back to school and all of that. Obviously a weekend coming up, but I feel like after sort of 2 weeks of everything kind of being upside down between bowl season and winter break with schools closed and then the transfer portal being all crazy, we're going to settle into a little bit of a groove here, hit the groove of basketball season, which is always something worth looking forward to. And I'm this little 2-day break here, not break, but this little 2-day stretch at the end of this week, after you got past New Year's Day and just kind of got back into the swing of things. It's nice to be doing that. And the Morning Pit mailbag is part of it. So what we do every week? We take questions from Pitt fans on the Between Fifth and Forbes message board at Panther-Lair.com. You should know that website if you're a Pitt fan. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com, and you can get interaction with other Pitt fans on the message boards all day, every day. Message boards have a bad reputation, but it's a good place to interact with other people who have shared interests, and that's what we have on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. It's a lot of fun. I think it's the best online community of Pitt sports fans you are going to find. And, every week we take questions from Pitt fans for the mailbag. And we got a lot this week. Maybe it was because we didn't do it last week, but we got a lot of questions this week. So I want to dive into it. But I'll say real quick, if you want to be part of the mailbag, if you want to submit a question for the mailbag one of these weeks, you need to go to Panther-Lair.com and go to the message boards at Between Fifth and Forbes message board. And post your questions there, because that's the best place to do it. And that's the only place to do it, actually. What am I talking about? That's where we get our questions, and that's where we answer them, right here at on the Morning Pit mailbag. So let's jump into it. First question here comes from SV Pig 1. In terms of getting on the offensive of adding players, how aggressive do you expect the Pitt to be? Is there a decent bit of money left to bring in an impact transfer or two, or will they be hitting the bargain bin again? Like a Nate Matlack type or FCS. How aggressive do I expect them to be? I mean, I don't know if there's a point that they hit this offseason where they were like, okay, crap, now we really got to try. Now we got to really be aggressive. I think they're being as aggressive as they can be. I mean, there's certain realities, right? Like, who's the highest bidder? If that and if that's what the priority is for a player, and I think for most guys it probably is. I mean, you want a good fit, you want a good relationships, you want to be in a place that you're comfortable, but you also want to get the most money you can get. I think that's natural. Most of us would make a similar decision, for the similar reasons. And so, Pitt is running into that. I think with some of the guys we've seen them attached to or trying to get visits from, or some of the really big name guys who have gone into the portal, the Pitt's not really involved with at all. They might get, their coaches might follow those guys on Twitter, but there's not a whole lot that happens. I remember a couple years ago, Jahmyr Gibbs from Georgia Tech went into the transfer portal. Pat Narduzzi followed him on Twitter, so I texted our Georgia Tech guy, our good friend Kelly at the GeorgiaTechRivals.com site. I was like, hey, just out of curiosity, I just got to do a little due diligence here. I saw, Pat Narduzzi's following Jahmyr Gibbs on Twitter. You hear anything? Is there any? He's like, dude, he's like going to Alabama or something. I was like, okay, yeah, never mind. And so, I think with those like really top end guys, that's where it ends up. That's what you get. You get a follow on Twitter, but the money's never, at least in the current system, in the current setup, the money's never going to be close enough to really be competitive with those guys. So there's an echelon of guys. There's the Juan Soto level that you're just not going to compete for, unless all of a sudden the resources increase tenfold or maybe at least fivefold. You're not going to be in those conversations or discussions. So you talk about like shopping at the bargain bin. I mean, there is a level that Pitt is going to shop, and is it the Nate Matlack type who is playing in one defensive scheme and thinks a move to another defensive scheme could benefit him, that you feel like he's got a good profile for what you're trying to do? That's one option. Is it FCS standouts? That's an option too. And I think like these are not ineffective ways to go about it. You might see a guy out there that you feel like is a really good fit for what you do and what you want to do and what you feel like you need. And so you go after him, like even if he's coming from, FCS or something like that, because there are enough good players out there in FCS schools, group of 5 schools, even, power conference schools, guys who maybe aren't playing as much. There's plenty of good players out there that you can find. And I don't think there's any real shame in going the FCS route. We can name drop Jared Verse went from Albany to Florida State and look how good he was. And I don't feel like we're really like cherry picking to do that. I think there are enough good players at those levels that you can fill your needs and get productive players at this level by, so-called shopping there. And so is it bargain bin? Not necessarily. Is it being smart with your resources and trying to find the guys who fit that you can afford, that you can bring in? Maybe that's just two different ways of saying the same thing. But I mean, I do think they absolutely still have needs. I think when you look at the guys that they are bringing in, they'll have a handful of visitors this weekend. I mean, they're probably fitting into that category you're talking about. You're limited by your resources. And I think there are enough resources to put together a competitive roster, but there aren't necessarily enough resources to go out and get the number one guy in the portal or the number one guy at a position in the portal. It's just not there right now for a variety of reasons. So, I don't think the approach changes. I don't think they try to get more aggressive. I think they're trying to use the resources they have, and they've been trying to do that since the portal opened, at the end of the regular season. The special sauce says, do you think any changes happened to the football coaching staff? Well, none by Pat Narduzzi's decision thus far. I think those would be the kind of things you would have seen, particularly with the early signing day. With signing day being as early as it was this year, I think any changes that would have been made would have been made. Any changes Pat Narduzzi wanted to initiate would have been made. I don't think you can ever entirely rule things out. I think Charlie Partridge and Taekwon Underwood both left in like January, for those NFL jobs. Those opportunities are always going to pop up and probably steal, there's always a chance that they could steal one or two guys away. As we sit here though on January 3rd, or to say January 2nd, that's when I'm recording this. Something could change between now and the time you watch it. But as we sit here right now, coming up to the end of this week, first few days of January, everything's still in place. And so I think the fact that they've gotten into January without any changes says the likelihood is pretty minimal. Maybe you'll have that one guy who gets a job in the NFL after the NFL goes through its coaching carousel, its off-season, its post-season coaching carousel. Maybe you'll have that one guy who, his buddy or somebody he's worked with before gets a job as a head coach or coordinator and he gets the call. to come join the staff. But otherwise, I mean, there's nothing I'm necessarily hearing about right now. It seems like, I mean, obviously, everybody's still in place for now. So we'll see if the next few weeks bring anything, but it's not going to be the kind of, I mean, famous last words here, but it's not going to be the kind of upheaval and turnover that we saw last year where the entire defensive staff or entire offensive staff was replaced. Atwood 409, what grade would you give the recruiting class? What grade would you give the staff for roster retention? And what grade do you expect to give them for roster additions? The recruiting class, it feels like a Pitt recruiting class. I think there have been a couple classes over the last maybe 4 years where I felt like they were really kind of exceptional and exceeded what the staff has typically brought in. Classes that would probably give, an A- to or an A. Most classes are probably hovering in that B to B- to C+ territory. And that's probably where this year's class falls. I think there are some really intriguing guys. Most of them are on defense. I think the defensive back prospects in this class look really good. I like the kinds of linebackers they brought in. I'm interested with some of the defensive end reinforcements that they're bringing in. The offense is a bunch of short, fast guys. At least the offensive skill guys, and there's a lot of them, right? There's like 6 running backs and receivers, or however many it is. And they're all small and fast. So let's see. Mason Heinschel was really good in high school. I think there's a lot of potential there. I like how he makes plays on the move. The tight end they got is like a big flex receiver type of guy, so that's intriguing. And who knows about the offensive lineman? We'll see. We'll see who develops, and we'll see who's still in the roster in 3 or 4 years. And that's kind of the reality of that situation. So it feels like a typical class. I'd probably give it in anywhere in that B to C+ range. As far as roster retention, I mean, I think you go with an A. They've lost one guy who was a starter this past season, 2 guys total who will be projected to be starters next year, I think, it's Sincere Edwards and Rylan Gandy. Jordan Bass was a loss, but he would have been a top backup. Nate Yarnell would have been a top backup. Really just 2 projected starters for next season that they've lost, which I think if you get through an offseason and you've only lost 2 projected starters, which is where they're at right now, we'll see what the numbers change, or we'll see if the numbers change. But I think if you get through an offseason and you've only lost 2 projected starters, then you did a pretty darn good job. And it's not for a lack of having guys who would be attractive to other teams in the transfer portal. I mean, I think there are plenty of guys that could get plenty of good deals from plenty of other teams if they went into the portal, but they decided not to. They decided to stay at Pitt. Got a nice deal from the collective, feel good about their connections and relationships with the staff and how they fit with the offense or defense. And, I think it was a win. I think they did a great job. And it's a shout out to Alliance 412. It's the Pitt coaches. It's the players for choosing to stick it out. I mean, I think there's a lot that goes into it, a lot that you like to see out of it. But I would give them an A. Not an A+ because they did lose 2 projected starters. But it's almost at the point now where you have a certain allowance of projected starters you can lose and still have done pretty well with roster retention. And so I would say they've excelled there. I would give them an A for roster retention. In terms of roster additions, we're talking about portal additions. I think that grade's incomplete. It's really hard for me to guess, to even sort of estimate, or what grade do I expect to give them. I don't know. I don't know what they're going to get. I don't know who they're going to get. I have an idea of what they would like to get, how many players they would like to add, but I'm not entirely sure who those players are going to be or how many they're going to get. Are they going to get their goal of, who knows now, how many offensive linemen they would like to have? I'm sure it's still at least 3. They would probably like to have even more than that. Are they going to get 3? Probably. Are they going to get 4 or 5, which I think I would need to see of quality guys in order to give them a very good grade? I don't know. That's a bit of a tougher sell. They got to get a corner. They got to get, I think another running back would be good. Obviously, offensive line and pass rush are the 2 biggest needs from the transfer portal. And so far, they've gotten 1 guy. He's an offensive lineman, and that's good. He should be able to step in and be the starting right tackle. That's great. But that's 1 guy. They need more offensive linemen. They need more defensive ends. They needed more defensive ends before Sincere Edwards went into the transfer portal, and now Edwards is in the transfer portal, so they need even more defensive ends. It's a tough spot, and so it's hard for me to say right now what grade I expect to give them when there's so much that is still needed out there, and you just don't know what they're going to hit in terms of quantity or quality. Next question. Matthew Spears says, prediction for next portal commitment. I don't know. There's Rashawn Murray is a guy. He was at Cal, defensive back. He was an All-American at the D2 level. He's coming in for a visit this weekend. Local kid, City League guy, pretty good player. Very productive, successful cornerback at Cal PA, I should specify. Had 4 interceptions this past year. I think they've got a pretty good chance of landing him. Local guy, get him to come back home, and that could help fill in that depth issue at cornerback. So I guess that would be my prediction, but we'll see. GPL PGH1, can you please discuss what you know about NIL agents? Who are they? What type of certifications, if any, are they required to have? And how are they compensated? Through the player's NIL package or through the individual collectives? As much of a crap show. We're saying crap again. What is going on with these bad language here? Is this what we're going to do in 2025? Are we just going to say bad words all the time? As much of a crap show the NIL transfer portal has become, are these NIL agents making the situation more complicated? Yeah, to me, as far as I can tell, it's completely unregulated. It could be somebody who's, NFL PA certified agent, or it could be like your uncle who's going to be negotiating things. When the story came out about UNLV and their quarterback kind of bailing on the team like 2 weeks into the season, one of the sidelines to that story was that the agent who had been negotiating on behalf of this quarterback wasn't even certified to be an agent in Nevada. So it's completely unregulated. It's completely all over the place. I think they get paid from the player. The collective doesn't do anything directly to pay money to these guys. I don't know that they're necessarily helping the process. This is probably one of these things as you move forward with the process of NIL, of revenue sharing, of paying players, and it becomes more formalized and it becomes more of a real, actual thing, a reputable thing, you're going to need, and you'll see more agent certification and reputable entities. Now, I don't mean to refer to all NIL agents as kind of fly-by-night operations, but I think a lot of them are. There's a decent amount that are. And I think as this whole thing as the process becomes more, like I say, just sort of solidified and real, I think you'll have more of a certification process for NIL agents. J-Town Panther fan says, what do you think Cam Corrin needs to average points and rebounds during conference play in order to consider his season and his addition to the roster successful? I think if they can get 13 and 10 consistently. I mean, good God, if Cam Corrin can average a double-double for this team in conference play, they'll win the ACC. You should mark that down. That would be my prediction. If Cam Corrin averages a double-double in conference play, they will win the conference. I would set the number at like 11 and 7. With some like real like splash games like he had on Wednesday, and then some quieter games like he had, when he was hitting sort of a lull there of 5 and 6 or something like that. So maybe like, I think if he could average like 11 and 8. That would be really good. If he averages like a double-double, I think this team could win a whole lot. Devil Dog 444 says, I know it has lost almost any relevance, but are there any lost in the cracks recruits that the staff is targeting for the second signing day? I know that focus is rightly on the portal, but incoming freshmen would be the cheapest option. Incoming freshmen would be the cheapest option, but they're not going to help you this year, particularly a guy that you get at this point in the recruiting process, unless you find a real steal, like a guy who's able and willing to come in and contribute like that. it seems unlikely. And so the focus is on the portal right now. Those are the guys who are going to help you in 2025. I don't really know of any late recruits they're falling through the cracks, diamond in the rough type of thing that they're on. We're sort of keeping an eye on that. But yeah, the focus is on the portal. The focus is getting transfers. The focus is on improving the 2025 team. And the recruits you sign in February are probably not going to go real far in that regard. Zenmeister 1992 says, do you think Narduzzi is on any kind of hot seat going into next year, or at least getting warmer? I know athletic directors are sometimes like GMs, in which they like to bring in their own guys to be the coach. I mean, I would have to think the seat got a little bit warm. You lose 6 games in a row after a 7-0 start. You lose to Toledo in the bowl game, in a game where, like, not only did you lose, but you looked bad. You know, like, the entire nation was watching that game. It really was. Like, if you were paying attention on social media, there were but I mean, there were national reporters and national outlets watching the game, commenting on it. When they kicked that field goal in the second overtime, I mean, it didn't just get criticized by Pitt fans, Pitt reporters, and the TV broadcast. It was, who was it? Chris Vanini or one of these guys was like tweeting in all caps, "Why are you going for the field goal here?" So everybody saw that, and I think that added to the reputation that Pitt has, and it added to the reputation that Pat Narduzzi had, and it added not in the way that you want to be adding. It was a negative for Pitt. Another one, and that's, I think. It's bad. It's a bad look. And so was the whole not shaking hands at the end of the game. It was a bad look. And so, when you have that on top of a 7-6 season, on top of a 6-game losing streak, and that's how you cap it, yeah, I got to think the seat gets a little bit warm. Like how couldn't it get a little bit warm for Pat Narduzzi? So I don't think he's getting fired or anything like that. I actually think they'll probably bounce back and have a pretty decent year next year. But yeah, I would think the seat warms up a little bit after a season like that and a finish like that. Here we go. Scrolling here. Pitt MBA says, prediction on number of portal commitments to enroll in January above the 3 announced commitments. And then he says, will Dunn and Ish's injuries be blessings in disguise as it forced the team depth to improve, with bench players seizing opportunities to improve with more playing time born out of necessity? Portal commits to enroll in January. I mean, they have the 3 that are currently committed. I would say they add 4 more. 4, I think. As opposed to Leggett and Dunn's injuries and the blessing in disguise. I mean, it's gotten a lot more minutes for Brandon Cummings. It's gotten a lot more minutes for Amsal Delilich. It's put, Dunn's injury in particular has put Zach Austin into even more of a prominent role. Although I think he was going to have that even with Dunn playing. It's put him into a more prominent role, which I think has been good for his confidence. So, I mean, I think those are all bonuses. I do think there's a blessing in disguise there, but you want to be at full strength. And I think what we saw on Wednesday should give everyone a lot of confidence that if they are at full strength, they're going to be really, really good. Or they have a chance to be really, really good. But I do agree. I mean, like, maybe this is part of what makes them even better once they're back to full strength, is how much the depth developed without Dunn and Leggett. Like, you have a lot of insurance now. Where you have Lowe, Dunn, and Leggett. If one of those guys gets into foul trouble or gets hurt in a game or something like that, you now know you have Brandon Cummings you can bring in to that rotation. Amsal Delilich continues to develop. I do think it should give you a lot of confidence, maybe even more than you had before, for what this team can do if they run into adversity, because they ran into adversity on Wednesday and they didn't handle it great initially, but by the time you got to halftime, you knew they were in control. Even though they were still losing by 4, it was pretty clear who was going to win the game. And that's credit to the depth. Zenmeister also asks, what are a couple things you think Pitt basketball needs to improve to get where they want to go? One, I would say, is Lowe has to be better. He's got good counting stats, but he's been pretty inefficient this season, shooting only 38.7% from the floor, 27% from three-point range. I think his three-point shot's going to come. I don't think he's going to be a sub 30% 3-point shooter all year long. I think when you get back to full strength, he can maybe facilitate a little bit more than he has. And I think that'll help his efficiency numbers shooting-wise. Team-wise, I think they just need to rebound better. And I don't know how much improvement you can make on that start to finish of a season. I don't know how much improvement you can make on that, from January 1st on. To a certain extent, you sometimes end up in a spot where you are who you are. But I do think that would be one thing. If they could rebound better, I think that would make them so much more dangerous. I like this question. I wanted to get to this. I wanted to get to these next two questions. That's almost all of them. This is great. We're going to get through almost all these questions, even though we're, coming up toward the half hour. Dion Jag says, what would you rate as the 5 most influential / exciting plays of the 2024 football season, considering defense and offense? I like this question because the reality is there's a lot. The 5 that came to mind for me, all right, the 5 that came to mind for me, and you might have a different take. These might not be the game-winning plays, but the 5 most exciting I'm counting it as he said, or Dion Jag said, 5 most influential / exciting plays of the 2024 football season. I'm going to do influential or exciting plays because, and I'll get this one out of the way first, the false starts against Clemson. I'm going to the negative first. The other ones are all good, but the fact is that was that stretch of false starts from the goal line was hugely influential. It cost them a win. They win that game if they score a touchdown there. I'm convinced of that. And then they're 8-4 playing in a different bowl game as opposed to 7-5 playing in Detroit. And so I would say that. More positive though. On defense, the Rasheem Biles pick 6. I know there were 3 to choose from in that game, 5 interceptions total, but the Rasheem Biles pick 6 against Syracuse was the one that I think set the tone. That was the first one. It was the first possession. He said, wow, this is going to be like that, huh? Making plays like that. Rasheem Biles had a huge season. I thought that play was one of the most exciting of the season, even though it was a shorter interception return for a touchdown than like Kyle Lewis was, 50 yards or something like that. I still think it was, exciting. The Dejon Reynolds touchdown catch against West Virginia was one of the signature plays of this season on so many levels. Huge in that game. Great play by Reynolds. A guy coming off the bench, not really, I think that was maybe his first target of the year, and makes a gigantic reception for a touchdown. And then my other 2 that I went with were from the Cincinnati game. There was Kanate Mumfield's 38-yard touchdown reception. That play was on 4th and 3 with about just under 11 minutes to go. Pitt was still down by a couple scores at that point, and Eli Holstein throws to Kanate Mumfield, catch and run, 38 yards for a touchdown to cut it to a 1-score game. And then the next touchdown, the 56-yard touchdown for Desmond Reed, is another one that I put in this group at Cincinnati. A little less than 6 minutes left to go. It was on 2nd and 10. Catches a pass, runs 56 yards for the touchdown. They could potentially tie it with a 2-point conversion, but they failed on the 2-point conversion, so they had to kick the field goal later. I was going to pick the Ben Sauls field goal, but it was like a 35-yard kick. So I went with those 2 touchdowns. So those are the 5 that jump out to me. The false starts at the goal line against Clemson, Dejon Reynolds, West Virginia touchdown catch, Rasheem Biles pick 6 against Syracuse, and then those 2 touchdowns, Mumfield and Reed, those 2 long touchdowns in the 4th quarter to win at Cincinnati. I would put those as my top ones. All right, Rocky Panther says, I don't see your optimism on Amsal Delilich. I haven't seen an ability to create any shot. His ball handling is loose, not athletic, yet in the Morning Pit, you are still very, very optimistic. What are you seeing that I don't? I would love to see him break out. He has a very nice shooting technique, and it's smooth, but it hasn't translated into many points or made a difference yet. Yeah, I just think there's a lot of times where you just see him do something and you're like, okay, there's something there. Like, and it's not perfect. It's not 100%. I don't get how his shooting touch is so, like you said, it's a really nice technique, very smooth. It looks so pretty when he shoots. And then he was like 2 of 5 from the free throw line on Wednesday. Like, I don't know how that happens. but like the shooting touch, like you're right, like his ball handling is loose, but he's really confident about his ability to drive, and I think he's given himself. Can he create a shot the way Ishmael Leggett or Jalen Lowe can? No. Can he create a shot better than probably Zach Austin, the Diaz-Graham twins? You know what I mean? He's right in that between spot. You know, where I think he's a little bit better than those guys, not quite as good as the guards, the top guards. But I think he's also got a good shooting stroke that he should be able to drive, pull up, and make jump shots. You know, make the mid-range jumpers. I don't understand how he only had one field goal attempt in 18 minutes against Cal on Wednesday. I think you need to get him involved a little bit more in the offense. I just feel like it's going to happen. I just feel like he's going to have a game where all of a sudden he rains like 4 3-pointers and scores 17 points or something like that. And we're going to be like, look, there it is. I wonder if Cal defended him a little bit differently because it seemed like he wasn't quite as open as he had been in recent games. I mean, that was such a big talking point on the boards about Amsal Delilich getting open. Nobody seemed to pass to him. I wonder if Cal paid more attention to him than some of the previous teams have. And so maybe that's going to be a factor to watch, that other teams start paying a little more attention to him. They don't want to let him go off. But I don't think you can overcommit to defending Amsal Delilich when Jalen Lowe and Ishmael Leggett and these guys are out on the court. So, you know, what do you want me to let's see, just share. You're not asking me to convince you of my. You actually didn't ask a question at all, despite looking for questions about the mailbag. I just think there's enough talent there that you can see that you're like, look, this guy might not be able to do all the things, but if they can get him going in a game, like he could change the course of a game. I think he's that good of a shooter and that sort of dynamic enough that I think he can change the course of a game. And I'm probably going to stick to this for at least a little while longer. I mean, what are they now? 13 games in? 14 games in? You know, there's still like 18 games left to go. Plenty of time for this to happen and plenty of time for me to stick with it and keep trying to, you know, just keep trying to wait for him to break out and keep talking about him breaking out. All right, last one. Jay Lazinger says, I know we would never stop fighting for a recruit, but I can't help thinking back to Sincere Edwards' recruitment and how he flipped and then wasn't coming, then he was. Does it seem to you like certain recruits are just destined to test the NIL market if they show any promise at all? I think if a recruit, a high school recruit, comes to you and says, I need a bigger NIL deal, there's probably a decent after he commits. He comes to you before signing day and says, I need a bigger NIL deal. There's probably a decent chance that at some point in his career, maybe after his freshman year, he's going to come to you and say, I need a bigger NIL deal. And after he agrees to an NIL deal, he's going to come back to you and say, I need a bigger NIL deal. I think there's probably a decent chance of that happening when you have recruits, you know, like, I don't want to say like they tell you who they are or, you know, this, you know, you get a sense of these guys from how they handle their recruitment, but to some extent, you shouldn't be surprised, I think. Sincere Edwards did. I mean, he flipped from UCF to Pitt, you know, kind of waffled a little bit for a while there. You know, freshman year comes, he's here, he plays his freshman year, shows a lot of promise, gets an NIL deal, agrees to it, goes back on it, and ends up transferring to UCF, which he announced yesterday. He's going to UCF, or UCF announced it, whatever it might be. It's a pattern, right? It's a pattern of behavior, and it's one you shouldn't really be surprised about. So, yeah, I think you probably, if you see guys who handle it like that in the recruiting process, you can probably assume you're going to be hearing about them asking for bigger NIL deals when they get to college, particularly if they have a little bit of success. All right, I think that's it. Good 35 minutes of mailbag today. I appreciate everybody who contributed questions. It was great to get so much response on the message boards. It's always fun to do these mailbags. So thanks everybody who contributed. We'll have another one next week. Of course, we're back in the regular swing of things. We'll have our Wednesday night live show, although Is it next week? They have a game at 9 coming up here. I forget if it's next week, the week after. I'm looking at my little handy dandy pocket calendar. It must be the 15th. The 15th, yeah, they're at Florida State on Wednesday night, the 15th. We'll still do a live show, actually. That game starts at 9 o'clock. We'll do a live show leading into it. But Wednesday nights at 8:30, we're live right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We have these Morning Pitt episodes every day of the week, Monday through Friday, a little bit of Pitt sports talk to get your day started. So do me a favor, like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you don't miss any of our Pitt video content. All right. Let's get going on 2025. Let's dive back into the routine. It's Friday, though, so you get the weekend coming up. You can enjoy that before the real dive back into the routine comes next week. But thanks for tuning in today. I appreciate it. Hope you have a great Friday. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the game tomorrow night, Pitt-Stanford at the Peterson Event Center. And we'll be back on Monday with another Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.